Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and today we will be doing a debrief on Tommy's story. And for those of you who have not listened to Tommy's story yet, I suggest you do. But for those who haven't, here is a short summary of Tommy's story. Tommy grew up with a father who presented himself as the authority in their household. His mother was loving, but she was also trapped inside the same system that Tommy was. She was criticized, she was mocked, body shamed, and controlled. And Tommy saw this happening. He felt sorry for her, but he also learned that nobody in the home could really protect him from his dad. And as Tommy got older, his father's treatment of him changed. When Tommy was no longer the cute little kid, he became more of a target. His father criticized his body. He humiliated him in public. He mocked his interest. He slapped him. He scared him in cars. He lurked and watched him. He used circular conversations that made Tommy feel confused and trapped, and he changed the rules whenever it suited him. Tommy's dad was all about power and control. It was about image. It was very gender norm rules that was going on in this family, and the expectations from the dad were all about these roles, and they were impossible for Tommy to live up to. And over time, Tommy learned to avoid the home, avoid attention. Later, substances became a big part of Tommy's life. It became a way for Tommy to breathe, a way to cope with the fear that was going on, and just a way to get through the day. And it grew out of a nervous system that had Tommy living in a survival mode for a very, very long time. Tics began to emerge along the way with anxiety, and the substances like alcohol really helped with all of that. And eventually, Tommy did go get help with the substances, and he understood that there was more going on than just the addiction, that there's a lot of stuff underneath the addiction for him to understand, the abuse that was going on. And he eventually does go no contact with his father. He really started to focus on recovery, not just from the addiction, as I mentioned before, but just the pain of everything underneath. And, Tommy is now no contact with his dad. And unfortunately, he doesn't really get to talk to his mom as well. So that is a summary here of Tommy's story. And now I'm going to get into the key takeaways of Tommy's story and the fear of Tommy's story as well. So the first takeaway from Tommy's story is that Tommy was the scapegoat of his family. Tommy was treated like the problem in a home where the real problem was the dad's need for domination over everything. And Tommy was assigned this role. And once he was assigned this role as being the scapegoat, almost anything could be used against him. His body was used against him in a huge way. He was fat shamed. He was shamed for his looks. At one point, his dad took him to a department store, to a JCPenney, to measure his waist. To all of the pictures that were being taken and his dad walking away. His dad really needed to have control, and it was really taken out on him. His sisters were there, but for the most part, they were filling their roles. And in his dad's eyes, Tommy just wasn't filling the role that he wanted him to fill. And Tommy was damned if he put up a stink, and he was damned if he didn't. In the moment where Tommy talks about playing music at school, it's a really perfect example of this. He got together with his friends. They formed a band. They figured out how to ask the principal if they could play. They got up there and they did it. And this is just a big moment for Tommy. It doesn't matter if the music here was perfect at all. The point is that he had an idea. He followed through with that idea. He put himself out there, and a parent should be proud. But his father could not let him have this moment. And he had to come in and destroy it. He had to turn it into shame. He had to turn it into criticism. He had to turn this moment into, why didn't you tell me you needed singing lessons? He reversed it back onto him that his singing wasn't very good. That's just a really cruel thing to do to a kid. And it's teaching Tommy here, and it teaches a lot of kids that even when they're brave, that they can be wrong. Even when they accomplish something they should be proud of, that they shouldn't be proud of what they're doing, that there's something wrong with it still. and that even when they try something and put themselves out there, that they're embarrassing. So at this point, he's really trying to crush Tommy's independence. That's what the abusive parent, his dad here, is doing. And he's just trying to make Tommy a failure, even though he is succeeding. And he's trying to make Tommy feel bad about himself when there is nothing wrong with Tommy at all. And I know a lot of you out there have gone through this or are going through this right now. And, Tommy's dad just like to punish Tommy for trying to become himself. And that's what happens with the scapegoat all the time. The scapegoat is usually the one that pushes back a little tiny bit and is trying to get autonomy and isn't falling in line. And in this case with Tommy, that's what was going on here. And his dad would have none of it. And then the next big key takeaway here is humiliation as control. And this was a big thing that Tommy's dad did. And he just didn't do it to Tommy here. He did this to his mom. This is where Tommy saw it for the first time. Tommy's dad humiliated Tommy's mom at the dinner table by mocking the way she ate. He turned a piece of pie into a real big interrogation, and he humiliated her in front of other people to the point where she was crying, and then got mad at her after for getting upset. And with Tommy, he humiliated Tommy in many ways, taking him to a store over his clothing size, to the JCPenney. He humiliates Tommy at school after his band performance in front of all of the other kids. He would just take ordinary moments and create public shame out of these things. And this is a big control tactic. It is teaching someone like Tommy to shrink. It's teaching them to stop drawing attention to themselves. It's teaching them to stop trying. And if you grow up being humiliated in front of guests and classmates, salespeople at the JCPenney or other adults, and no one intervenes, you might start to believe that the problem really is you. You might start to believe that because no one is stopping it, that you deserve it. Or maybe this is just how families work. Or maybe you are the one who is too sensitive. And this is why public humiliation can really stay with someone for a very long time. And Tommy's father trained Tommy to associate visibility here with danger. And you can hear that in the way Tommy talks about becoming a wallflower. He talks about wanting just to fade into the woodwork. He talks about not speaking. He talks about avoiding home, staying at friends' homes, and just trying not to be noticed. And this was just a big survival mode here for Tommy, and humiliation as control was a big part of this. As I mentioned there just a second ago, he was avoiding home. Tommy was avoiding home because there was a huge loss of safety in Tommy's home. And that is the next big key takeaway that I want to talk about. Tommy's house was just not safe. It was not a safe home. He could be watched. He could be in the bathroom. The door had to be unlocked and his dad would just come in and slap him. He could be cornered. He could be interrogated. He could be humiliated inside the home. He could be pulled into circular conversations that he could not win, or he could be made responsible for his dad's moods. There was no place inside this home that he could fully relax at all. And when there's no place to relax, your body starts adapting to that. And Tommy can start scanning things, start monitoring the room, monitoring the mood, trying to predict what could come next. Learn when to speak, when to go quiet, when to disappear, when to leave the house altogether. And for Tommy, that was a big thing in his story where he said, other parents must have thought, like, when is this kid going to be going home? Because Tommy did not want to be home. And he had a very good reason for it, because that home was not safe at all. And a lot of you out there lived in these homes where being inside these homes was not safe. It was safer to be outside the home. Some people like to stay at school a lot longer and just be at other people's homes, play outside as much as they could, because being inside that home meant you were trapped inside that home where it was not safe at all. And the next key takeaway on our list is the circular logic and reality control of Tommy's life. And Tommy describes conversations where his father would ask him a question, then interrupt him, then answer a question with another question, then shift the focus, then make Tommy defend himself, then act like Tommy was the one who was being strange or guilty or nervous. And the goal of these conversations was not to understand anything. The goal here was control. And a lot of survivors who have gone through this, you'll recognize this. You just kind of go into this conversation thinking that there is a point. You think there's a question that's being asked. You think if you can just explain yourself clearly enough that the other person will understand. But when it comes with an abuser and this type of stuff, there is no understanding that is going to be coming, because understanding was not the goal of the abuser. It was just to keep you off balance, to keep you defending yourself. The goal here is just to make you feel confused, to make you feel small, to make you feel that you are wrong. And the goal is to make sure that the abusive person stays in charge. And when that happens to a child, it can be quite damaging. They could grow up feeling like every conversation could be a trap. They might over-explain themselves a lot of the time. They may freeze. They may apologize for things that they don't do. They may become afraid of answering simple questions, because simple questions growing up were not simple. And Tommy's dad, he could stare at him and then deny that anything was happening. He could ask why Tommy was nervous while doing something that would make Tommy nervous. He could get caught doing something hurtful and then shift that focus onto Tommy. He could create the problem and then make Tommy responsible for the reaction. And that is reality control that is going on. And when that happens over and over and over again, the survivor, like Tommy, can start to lose their trust in all of the situations that they're in. Reading those situations, they know something is off. They've been trained to doubt themselves. And that doubt just really seeps inside of you, creating a new type of reality that the abuser wants you to have, that just keeps you confused, off balance, and just doubting everything about who you are, your choices, everything. And this is devastating for a child, but this also happens in, the adult relationships as well. But for a child, it can be extra devastating because this is the reality they've been living in their whole entire life. So they don't know any different, and it can just really hinder them going forward. And then the next thing on our key takeaways is the family image in Tommy's story and being an extension of the abuser. And Tommy's father seemed very invested in how the family looked from the outside. He wanted the woman to look a certain way. He wanted Tommy to perform in a certain way. He wanted everyone to reflect well on him. Family members were not allowed to just simply be autonomous people. They were expected to be extensions of Tommy's dad's ego. And this is why Tommy became a target. Independence here becomes very threatening to Tommy's dad. A controlling parent like Tommy's dad doesn't see a child's independence as being healthy. They experience this as being disobedient, disrespectful. They see it as betrayal. And that's terrible for a child, because a child is supposed to grow away from their parent. And they're supposed to become autonomous people. They're supposed to develop their own interests, supposed to try their own things, and to be encouraged to do those things. They're supposed to have their own inner life, and they're just supposed to become themselves. But in Tommy's home, that was not allowed. And in Tommy's home, that was dangerous. So when Tommy tried to do the things that he wanted to do on his own, those things were frowned upon. Tommy felt the repercussions of all of those things. Tommy's dad did everything to hurt Tommy for not being this idealized version of what he thought his son should be. And it was his belief, and that you should be the extension of everything that he thinks is the right thing. And his dad was presenting him with impossible standards to live up to that would, no matter what, constantly change as well. And it's just devastating for a child. And, whoever's going through this, as I said before, my heart goes out to you in all of these situations. But again, for those of you who've been living, with impossible expectations, it's really hard to free yourself from that throughout your whole entire life, because those expectations have been a weight on you for so long. But it's a big step for everyone going forward to rid yourself of those things. So that was our key takeaways. And now we're just going to discuss fear. This is not going to be a long one. And for fear here, we're not really going to be talking about Tommy per se, but we're going to be talking about his sister who passed away from addiction at the age of 58 years old. And she was in this household, and even though she was not treated in the way that Tommy was, she was still affected by all of the abuse that was going on inside this home, the power and control that was going on. And she still formed an addiction to cope. And the biggest thing between her and Tommy was asking for help. Even when his addiction was active, Tommy was asking for help. And that was frowned upon by his dad. And the whole household learned that asking for help and needing things was not a good look. They saw how Tommy was treated for asking for help, something a child should have. So there was a fear in this household for asking for help. It was deemed as being scary because they saw how Tommy was being treated for having needs, So Tommy's sister saw how Tommy was treated her whole entire life, his whole entire life. And she knew that asking for help had consequences. Being deemed a screw up had consequences. And sadly, Tommy's sister really needed help, but she was just too afraid to ask for it. And eventually she succumbed to her addiction. And that's just heartbreaking that you can live in a household of fear and fear of needing to have your needs met. Having a fear of that could lead to, a possible death. And in Tommy's family, it did. And it is heartbreaking. And I'm sure some of you out there have a story similar to this of someone who's just too afraid to ask for help because they saw what would happen to someone in their family if they did. And it's sad. And Tommy was the scapegoat and Tommy was an addict. But Tommy, in reality, was the healthiest one in this household because he didn't accept the behavior that was going on, and he wanted to be equipped to handle the rest of his life in a healthy way. And I feel sad for him that he was robbed of a family growing up. And I really hope that he gets to see his mom again in the future. And of the things that I want for him most is to just have a second part of his life where he's clean living the life, for himself, being autonomous. And I really hope that he gets to see his mom again. And for all of you that grew up like Tommy, my heart goes out to all of you as well. And I hope you found this episode helpful, insightful, validating. And if you want to be a guest on our Survivor Story episodes like Tommy was, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com, fill out our guest form, press the submit button. We'll go from there. We also have a support group at our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. And we have a newsletter where you get a free workbook for every new survivor story. And that is all at narcissistapocalypse.com. And that is it for this debrief episode. So for myself and Tommy, we hope you have a good night.